I'm joined now by Beto O'Rourke. Thanks so much for joining me.
Good to be with you.
So you've been hosting a series of town halls across the state of Texas, and you've done this before. You've obviously ran for the U.S. Senate in 2018. You ran for governor in 2022. And so, how do these town halls right now feel different from even previous election cycles where Democrats were overperforming, like in 2018?
I think like a lot of people right now, I'm just trying to do whatever I can to be helpful. And I just know from the Senate race in 18, the governor's race in 22, we just have this ability to bring people together. And importantly, not just Democrats. So, Austin, Dallas, Houston, we got to be there. But we've been in Mansfield, we've been in Amarillo, we've been in Wichita Falls, we've been in Denton, Texas. These are the places, frankly, that have been either taken for granted by Republicans or written off by Democrats, and folks are going unrepresented and unheard. So showing up, not only am I learning a lot from the people who attend these town halls, but everyone in attendance is getting to hear each other. Folks know that they're not alone when 750 other people show up in Amarillo, Texas, or that person who, for whatever reason, isn't a veteran, didn't serve their country. They get to listen to the man in Wichita Falls who says, how is cutting 83,000 jobs from the VA? Most of them, by the way, will be veterans who will lose their jobs. Yeah. How is that going to help me get in and see somebody for my service-connected disability or my behavioral health appointment? There's a lot of power in bringing people together. And it does feel a lot like 2017. When I first got out there on the road, people understand clearly what is happening to this country, undermining the Constitution, the rule of law, the attacks on our fellow Americans, especially the most vulnerable. And they want to see us fight, all of us. And I think this false choice being offered to Democrats, are you going to be more moderate, more centrist? Right. Are you going to be more progressive? It's the wrong question. Are you going to surrender or are you going to fight? People want us to fight.
It has felt for so long like the intra-party feud has been whether you're progressive, whether you're a more moderate Democrat, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. And I hope that there is some understanding that it's okay if you are progressive and you're representing a progressive district. It's okay if you're more moderate. I mean, Jared Golden is not going to win in AOC's district and vice versa. She's not going to win in his district. And that's okay. That's the curse and the blessing of being in a big tent party is that if you want everybody from, Joe Manchin to Bernie Sanders in the party, then you have to be willing to accept and appreciate the stances of those very people. But now it feels different because it feels like the overarching theme for Democrats, at least up to this point, has been that this party is really defined by its weakness, especially unto itself, but especially relative to a Republican Party that will stop at nothing to get what it wants. And they won't be bound by the Constitution. They won't be bound by the parliamentarian. They won't be bound by their own hypocrisy. I mean, we've watched as Mitch McConnell scoffed at the very notion that we could allow Merrick Garland to get a hearing because it was an election year, and yet ushered through Amy Coney Barrett's nomination, even as votes had already been cast in that election cycle. And so is there some sense, at least among the people that you've spoken with, that this idea of moderate versus progressive takes a backseat to their willingness to actually show up and fucking fight for people?
Exactly. I mean, I think sometimes it can seem like the Democratic Party is more interested in being right or even in being polite than being in power. Whereas the Republican Party under Donald Trump cares more about power than anything else, to the point you made, more than the Constitution, more than our morals, our ethics, more about the criminal code. They just care about power, and that's it. And they've been very, very, very effective at it. And so to meet that challenge, I think we have to be absolutely focused, aggressive, even ruthless about winning power. And I think that needs to include the broadest possible coalition, a true united front where we no longer define ourselves along differences of geography, race, or where we are on the policy spectrum. We agree on this much, that we're very close to losing what Lincoln called the last best hope of Earth. And 249 years in, if it is our generation that meanly loses everything that everyone else has sacrificed and struggled and served to achieve, that is on us for eternity. And I know you and the people who are part of this movement are not having that. And so we've got to do everything we can with what we have, where we are, to fight back. And so that means coming to the town hall that we're hosting in East Dallas on Monday. It means showing up on the street corner with your neighbor who says, hey, I'm just going to protest on the corner of Mesa and Sunland Park. I hope people show up. I hope somebody sees this sandwich board. I hope it moves somebody. You know, not to invoke something that can be trite, because I think it actually is profound at this moment. You know, Robert Kennedy, the senior, in his Ripples of Hope speech, he talks about, you know, this question that's on everyone's mind. Who am I against this concentration of power in the hands of the president or in the oligarchs or these billionaire masters of algorithm and influence? What am I against all of that? And Kennedy in that speech says, look, you do this thing. You send out this little ripple of hope because you have the courage of your convictions. You stood up to be counted. And that ripple is going to meet somebody else's ripple. And they're going to continue to meet until there is a current that can break down the mightiest walls of oppression. That's what's happening in this country right now. So to those who took a chance and showed up at the hands-off marches or coming to these town halls or protesting or marching or doing whatever they can, not waiting for the DNC
right.
or people in elected office to give them orders, God bless you. That's what's going to save the country. It is not going to be the people in traditional positions of power. It is going to be the people at large, and that's got to be all of us.
Beto, are you hearing from folks in these town halls who you've spoken with who might have remained a Republican even throughout the blue wave election of 2018, even, you know, during Trump's second unsuccessful run for president in 2020, people who, despite all of that, were Republicans and yet now see something different happening within the Republican Party, see something different happening to our democracy, and are, you know, changing their political affiliation or are showing openness to supporting Democrats. Anecdotal though this may be, still just curious what you're seeing actually on the ground talking to these people.
People in 2024, by and large, wanted change. And there was, whether we think this is fair or accurate or honest, there was one candidate who really embodied that change. Like, yeah. I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to blow the place up. I'm going to confound the Constitution. I'm going to undermine everything that you hold dear because this thing, this system, this apparatus isn't working for you.
Yeah.
And we cannot judge, and we should totally understand how people made that decision. You know, I'm getting $7.25 an hour in Texas. I can't afford to see a doctor.
Right. You have one party that's largely defending institutions and the other party that isn't. And those institutions are not working for those people. And so how can you expect those people to defer to the side that says, keep the institutions intact?
Exactly. But to your question, I think many of those who in good faith voted for Donald Trump have found that this change is not at all what they were looking for. And instead of making their lives better, he's enriching himself and his cronies. And the things that matter most to them in their lives are not improving. They're not changing at all because he's totally focused on himself and on those like him. I'm seeing those people. I mentioned being in Amarillo, Texas. So Amarillo is in two different counties. Potter County voted for Trump 80%. Randall County voted for Trump 72%. The place was packed. More than 750 people there, including guys 2 rows back wearing Make America Great Again hats. And they weren't there to protest. They had their arms crossed. They were listening. And then, you know, by the end of the town hall, I see their heads nodding. Not necessarily at what I'm saying, but at what their neighbors in Amarillo are saying. This woman stands up, shaky voice, not used to public speaking, and says, my 12-year-old daughter, who has significant disabilities, when Trump cuts the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that's going to target her. She's going to be ending up in some warehouse. And this woman said, I'm a mama bear, and I'm going to do everything I can to fight for her. And so she told us that she lives in Canyon, Texas, not too far from Amarillo. And I said, okay, ma'am, when does the Canyon Independent School District Board of Trustees meet? We found out it meets Monday at 7 p.m. I said, anyone near Canyon, Texas, you go have her back Monday at 7 p.m. Let's see if those trustees will vote to fill the gap now that Trump has turned his back on this community. I never asked her party affiliation. Yeah. I didn't ask the affiliation of anybody there. But not only did those 750 people hear her story and understand the consequence of Donald Trump, but everyone who picked up the Amarillo paper the next day or watched broadcast television, they saw that people were showing up for one another at this moment of truth. So yeah, I do think we, not we, the Democratic Party, not we, Beto O'Rourke. I just think we, the people who are stepping up at this moment of truth, I think we're making a difference right now. And I think we're connecting with those voters who want change. Now we have to be able to deliver for them.
Right. And be the party that actually embraces change instead of blindly deferring to the same institutions that I think largely have not worked for people in the past. I want to dig into Texas a little bit because, Texas is like the gift for, Democrats. I mean, once we are able to flip Texas, and I think that and I hope that it's a when, not if, but then the whole map obviously changes. And it was looking more and more from 2018 to 2020 to 22 like Democrats were chipping away at the Republicans' lead and that we were only, 1 or 2 or 3 cycles away. And then, of course, come 2024, that lead widens again. And that's commensurate with what we've seen in the rest of the country. But it is still a step back. And so I'm just curious how you see the landscape in Texas that did look really favorable to Democrats and less favorable to Republicans that kind of did revert back to the mean a little bit.
In 2030, there'll be a new census for this country. And in that year, we'll learn that Texas picks up population.
Yeah.
And much of the Midwest and Northeast loses population.
And where we are right now in California.
Absolutely. And so by the presidential election in 2032, which will be upon us before we know it, you could win as a Democrat every single one of the so-called blue wall states, and you'll still lose the White House.
Yeah.
If you can't pick up Texas and the Sun Belt. And you cannot pick up Texas and the Sun Belt if you start working on it in 2032 or 2030 or 2028.
Right.
You got to work on it today. So our group, Powered by People, we're out there registering likely Democrats on college campuses, the very population that's targeted by the Republicans in power for disenfranchisement, not only registering them, but staying in touch with them to guide them all the way through the election process. It's the most voter suppressive state in the union, so we've got to work harder than anywhere else in the union. But to your great question, and kudos to you for being on this, not today in 2025, the first time I ever talked to you. 8 years ago, you were asking about Texas because you saw the potential, the value, and also the necessity of this state sooner or later. If we don't get some help from the outside, we're fucked.
Yeah.
And not we in Texas, but we, the United States of America. In 2020, to use an example, the Democrats nationally spent about $28 per voter turning them out in Georgia. In the state of Texas, $7 per voter. I raised, thanks to many of your listeners and viewers, a lot of money, $7, $25 at a time running for governor. I think $80 million all told. Greg Abbott, the guy I was running against, spent $130 million all told. And that's before independent expenditures and other statewide Republicans spent money in those campaigns. Look, I hate money in politics. Money is not everything. There are a lot of other factors and qualities that we got to consider. But until we start putting our money where our mouth is and start investing in places like Texas, then we're going to continue to lose them. And it won't just hurt the people of Texas. And it's absolutely killing us literally in Texas. The most obscene abortion ban in America, the least insured state in America, leading the nation in school shootings in America. All of that is happening in Texas. But that is a future coming to you if we don't turn this around. So there is no state, in my opinion, more important than Texas. We're doing our part in state, but now we need the rest of the country to come in and help us out as well.
And real talk right now, like, is the DNC, and you're not here representing the DNC, nor am I, is the Democratic Party doing what it needs to do to hold its own in Texas, or still not?
No. And look, if we've learned anything from 2024, we got to just be really honest if at times we hurt people's feelings about what has worked and what hasn't worked. And what hasn't worked is this really cynical strategy to pick 6 or 7 states and put billions of dollars into those states and leave everyone else to their own devices, to wither on the vine, which has happened in parties across the country. I was just in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The University of Alabama students invited me to be there because Trump had imposed himself on their commencement ceremonies. He wanted to outshine their hard work and their achievement. And they said, Trump is not us. This is not what we want the world to see. Hey, Beto, will you and Doug Jones and anyone else who would like to come down and speak to the moment? That was so encouraging to me because they weren't taking orders from central headquarters. They're not supposed to be relevant in today's Democratic Party, but they're a proud people, just like you are here in California, just like we are in Texas, and they want to be heard, they want to be listened to, and they want to lead.
Yeah.
And frankly, they're doing a better job of leading than a lot of the folks who are supposed to be leading us right now out of Washington, D.C. So if there's a silver lining in all of this, I think in the broken apparatus of today's Democratic Party nationally, there will emerge these real leaders whose names we don't even know right now in places like Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or in Amarillo, Texas. And they're going to speak to the moment, and they will carry the urgency that this crisis demands. And I think in the end, we're going to be okay. And I'm optimistic because I'm seeing and listening to these people everywhere I travel right now.
And I'm curious about that because, I mean, I know that you have optimism, and that's why it's so great to listen to you. There are, at the same time, I'm sure a lot of people, I'm sure that you're even encountering a lot of people, myself included, who are cynical about what to expect, now that we're in a moment where we have a lawless president who has no concern for what the Constitution says. He's right now defying a unanimous Supreme Court ruling. We have a Republican Party in Congress that is completely pliable, completely obsequious as far as Trump is concerned. So he has complete compliance with the legislative branch, with the judicial branch, the top of the judicial branch. He has a DOJ that exists to serve, to do whatever he wants them to do. And so where do you draw faith from in a moment where things do seem so grim and there isn't much to have hope for, at least outwardly?
Two things, and I hold on to these two things because I'm also tempted to despair given the facts that you just laid out. One is to remember who we are, what we're made of, and where we come from. We have been tested so many times over the last 249 years, from the very beginning at Lexington and Concord to deciding the issue of abolition and slavery and 300,000 plus lives sacrificed to end that. The brave men and women from communities like this one who served and fought in World War II, including on the beaches of Normandy in 44 to repel fascism, to defend democracy here at home. The civil rights and voting rights leaders and marchers, some of whom gave their lives as well, right, to establish what is close to a true democracy and really the exception in the history of the world. And really, I think, still the exception on the planet today. When I think about it that way, like you and I, we are the heirs to all of that sacrifice that came before us. We can't be found wanting at this moment of truth. As hard as it is, they went through some stuff that I would argue is even tougher against even greater odds. So we remember that. And then here's the second thing, which is we have got to find ourselves in the action that is being demanded of us right now. When I'm on a college campus, and it can be, Texas hot, 105 degrees, muggy. I'm in Houston at TSU, but I'm out there registering voters and listening to people and connecting with other volunteers. By the end of that day, though my shirt is soaked through, I'm completely exhausted. I have never been happier because I'm not on the sidelines. I'm not watching this happen to us. I'm not waiting for some cavalry to ride to our rescue. I am part of the answer. And maybe I registered 8 voters that day, but that's 8 more people who are on the rolls. And I know these other volunteers empowered by people are doing their part as well. And soon enough, if we're persistent and we're patient and we meet this moment the way history is calling us to meet this moment, we're going to overcome and we're going to get through this. So that sustains me. That keeps me going. If I fail to do those two things, to remember who we are and to do the work necessary, then I succumb to that temptation. But action is the antidote to despair. Action is the key to victory.
Real quick, I've worked with Powered by People before. Can you just explain how, for people who want to donate or to contribute, give anything at all to Powered by People, how can they do that?
Yeah, so this is an extraordinary organization comprised of volunteers. I'm a volunteer myself, unpaid. And we train our volunteers to become volunteer deputy registrars in Texas.
Which is especially difficult in Texas. The whole system is set up to make it damn near impossible to make sure that you can get anybody registered to vote.
After the 2013 Shelby versus Holder decision, which gutted the Voting Rights Act, no state has taken it harder than Texas. The most onerous voter ID laws, one ballot drop-off location per county, including Harris County with 5 million people in the middle of a pandemic, 750 polling place closures, and to your point, Brian, no online voter registration in the year of our Lord 2025, no automatic voter registration, no aid or assistance, especially to those young people who may not have the time or wherewithal to go down to the county registrar or to print something out. Like, what the hell is a printer? How do I find a stamp? What do you do when you mail a letter? I've got an 18-year-old, so I know those are real questions that these young people are asking.
Yeah.
So we train these volunteers to become VDRs. They meet young prospective voters literally where they are, very often on college campuses. And in addition to helping them through the registration process, they personally stay in touch with them as like a voting Sherpa to guide them through, this is the form of voter ID you need. This is where your nearest early voting location is. And because we're a partisan organization, this is who represents your values on a woman's ability to make her own decisions about her own body, on reducing shootings in our schools, raising the minimum wage, making sure that you can see a doctor. I mean, the basic things that regardless of party or any other difference are what Texans want right now. And so poweredxpeople.com is where you can go. You can sign up to be a volunteer. We'll take you even if you're not in Texas. There's work that you can do from a distance. You can donate to support those volunteers who are out there. And it's the kind of work that we're going to have to do over the long term. I really see two necessary approaches. One, meet the moment. Get out there and protest, show your face, stand up and be counted at this moment of truth. Two, let's take a page out of the Republican playbook and day in, day out, election year, so-called off years as well, justice of the peace, school board, all the way up to president, you do the work of registering and organizing voters and putting together the political power we need to win elections and then to deliver once we're in positions of public trust. So that's what Powered by People is doing in Texas right now.
Well, I've worked with Powered by People in the past. I believe in that in your organization to the ends of the earth. So highly recommend for anybody watching, if you're looking to contribute, help out Texas and invest at a time where we need some investment so that it could pay off in the future. Now is the time to do that. I'll put the link to Powered by People in the post description of this video or in the show notes of the podcast. Let's talk about the Senate race happening right now. Can you give a lay of the land in terms of what it looks like? Because we have John Cornyn running against Ken Paxton.
So you've got John Cornyn, who's been in the Senate since before you and I were born. Not really, but might as well.
Yeah.
Who we have no idea what the guy believes or thinks. He's absolutely just twisting in the wind, approaching Quisling status right now in terms of his collaboration with the Trump administration. And who cares about the politics of it? But it's hurting the people that he's supposed to serve and represent. In Amarillo, we learned that 13 USDA trucks full of food were turned away from the local food pantry and food bank because the Trump administration, with Cornyn's compliance, cut the USDA supplemental. 25% of rural hospitals in Texas that has already lost more rural hospitals than any other state are on the verge of closing because they're about to cut Medicaid. You add to that these cuts to the Department of Education, Title I funding. Schools in big cities and small rural counties alike are closing by the hundreds, if not the thousands. That's John Cornyn. The other guy who's likely to be in that Republican primary for the Senate is Ken Paxton, twice or maybe thrice indicted under FBI investigation until this current administration. He is as corrupt and antithetical to the values of Texas as you can find, impeached by a Republican majority in the state house, which
do you know how difficult it is for Republicans to actually impeach you?
Republicans impeached Ken Paxton. He averted conviction in the Senate trial, in part because the presiding judge in the Senate trial, who is our Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, took a multi-million-dollar campaign contribution. Some would read that as a bribe to basically decide the outcome of that in Paxton's favor.
I think the threshold now is like $400 million. Anything below a full-blown Boeing 747, you're okay with.
Yeah, apparently. And certainly in Texas, where there literally are no campaign finance laws. You can take any amount of money from just about anyone, and they do. So that's the choice right now on the Republican side. You look at the Democratic side, and I know we've been in the wilderness for more than 30 years. I'm so well aware of that as a lifelong Texan. But the talent that you see, including people who are currently holding public office, you look at folks like Jasmine Crockett, a name that you and your viewers and listeners have certainly heard, who's been in Congress a short time, was in the state house before that, but has really made an impact across the state and nationally. You look at James Tallarico, a name you may or may not know. I know you know him, but others may not. But if you haven't seen this guy, check him out. He's in the state house, and he's been leading this heroic fight to save our local schools. Our 3 kids in the O'Rourke family go to local public schools in El Paso. The governor is defunding our schools to send more than $1 billion of property taxpayer money to private schools to help out rich families who are already sending their kids to those schools. And Tallarico has been the leader that we need. And he's a guy to look out for. You look at the county judges across the state. other members of Congress, Greg Casar, who's leading the Progressive Caucus. We really have extraordinary talent in Texas. And so I'm encouraged by that. We don't know who will emerge from that. You have other open positions in 2026, at least on the primary side for governor, for lieutenant governor, attorney general, land commissioner, on down to state reps, state senate. So a really, really important year in Texas in 2026. And it is not too early for people to get after it.
What about you?
You know, I'm doing right now what I think is most helpful. You know, convening these town hall meetings, running Powered by People, getting folks registered to vote. I'm just going to make that my North Star. What can I do that is most useful and most helpful? And right now it is being with people. It is listening to people. And literally at every one of our events, we bring 2 microphones. I've got a microphone and there's another microphone in the audience. I want to make sure that everyone at this meeting and everyone who follows the live stream of this meeting and everyone who sees the broadcast TV report from this meeting or picks up the paper tomorrow gets to hear your voice. You have been unheard. No one's fighting for you. No one even knows you exist because they don't show up because Democrats fear to tread and Republicans don't have to be there. So no one is accountable. But we're going to show up. We're going to listen to you. And so are your neighbors and your fellow Texans and your fellow countrymen. So doing that just is so important. There's real power in that. I'm going to continue to do that. And if down the road there is something else that I can do that is helpful or useful, I will do that. As you know, I'm not afraid of a fight. I'll do whatever it takes. But right now it's doing this work with Powered by People.
All right. Well, I appreciate that work. And again, highly recommend for anybody watching right now or listening right now, if you can contribute, if you can donate, if you can help in any way, Powered by People. They've been doing great work for years and years and years. So highly recommend that you give what you can.
The website is poweredxpeople.org.
Beto, appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Grateful.